As we've talked about, in the pursuit of optimum image quality, we end up with files which may not necessarily look that good when you first get them on the screen. And I know you have a very interesting example here with using a number of shots of what the implications of that are, and that you can't just look at something on the screen and go, yeah, that's not going to work. Because this is a lot like looking at a negative, not that it's inverted, but it's the raw material. And now, as Ansel Adams said, I guess, the negative is the score and the print is the performance.
Very astute of you. One of the problems that a lot of people have is either falling in love or falling out of love with the image on the back of the LCD. I use the LCD for an informational tool. I don't really care about what the image looks like. Yes, it's useful to zoom in to see if you got it in focus. But by default, if you're shooting a raw image, by default, you got to start somewhere. And Camera Raw and Lightroom's default have often been accused of not looking like the LCD. Well, yeah. Thomas Knoll, our good friend who was the founding engineer on Camera Raw and does the Camera Raw pipeline, is of the mind that what he's trying to do is a normalized view of the raw file. It will not look good. It's not intended to necessarily look good. It's
not its purpose.
It's intended to show you what's in the file. And you and I used to shoot negative, color negative and black and white negative. You can't really see much in the negative form. You got to make a contact print. The contact print is not intended to be the final image. So really the concept here is, in its original form, Camera Raw and Lightroom has to start somewhere, and so it does. And this is an example of some images. Now, I'm a good photographer.
All right, you're not bad.
But, you know, sometimes I screw up, you know, my exposures. I've got some underexposures, I got some overexposures. I've got some images whose scene dynamic range is very flat. Here, all right, that's an underexposure. Here's a dynamic range that is way high, and you might think clipped, but it's not. Buffalo, the 15-foot mutant penguin. I've got a print of that, by the way. So with an ability to get past that first view or that initial kind of default view, this in Camera Raw or Lightroom is what I've been able to do in terms of optimizing the capture. In the shooting, you optimize up to the point of capture, but once it's in camera, you really can't do anything. This is the start of evaluating the image potential and doing the post-processing to optimize for the print or for the screen.
To stretch the Julia Child cooking analogy, you mentioned her name before, this is putting all the proper and appropriate ingredients together, and now this is the end result of baking all those individual little cookies.
Yeah, seasoned to taste.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good demo.
So basically, you know, I'm going to drill down on how to use some of the controls in Camera Raw or Lightroom and taking the image that you've got to basically, you know, create what it is that you want to make for the print or the display.
Right. And I think while we're wrapping up this discussion of the pursuit of image quality, something that's close to my heart is the issue not just of achieving technical perfection, if you will, or technical excellence in an image, but there's no point in having an excellent technical execution if the subject matter isn't interesting. And so, whereas we're not here really to teach a course in the aesthetics of photography, what I want to talk about is telling the story. What is it that a particular image is about? And that's a question I ask a lot of students when they show me their work. I say, tell me what it's about. And if they can't, and it doesn't have to be a complex sentence or a long story, but just, you know, whether it's an emotion or an intellectual thought, what was it that made you press the shutter at that moment? So here's an example, and let's have a look at it, and I'll talk about some of the things I did and why I did them, because the why is just as important as the what.
Okay.
As I walked around this recently opened archaeological site, this is just outside of San Miguel Allende, and it's called Cañada de la Virgen, Canyon of the Virgin. I was taken with the sense of history, of time. No one even really knows how old this is. Certainly pre-Columbian, it might be 1,000 years old, it might be 1,500 years old. Not much is known about the Indians that lived in this part of Mexico back in that period. But there was a feeling about the weight of age, and it was a bright sunny day. Blue sky, green grass, and it was just absolutely the wrong interpretation to just take a color photograph. So I can't say that I fully visualized what I have here now, but first of all, it was very hard sunlight. So I did one of those one-stop bracket HDR things that we've shown. And then I did a black and white conversion where I lightened the grass so that the green tonality, almost like shooting through a green filter, would have done in the days of black and white. And then I vignetted the sky very heavily, artificially heavily. But it felt to me like all of these things combined helped me to produce an image that had a little more gravitas. It had a little more, it was a little more serious. It wasn't the blue sky, green grass, and a bunch of rocks.
Postcard.
It wasn't a postcard. And when I work with photographers and do one-on-one sessions and seminars and workshops, one of the things I do when I do print evaluations is I'll look at a photographer's print and I will ask them, what is this about? What are you telling me? And very often, some will say, oh, I thought this, I felt that, it occurred to me that, what I wanted to say is, but very often, it'll be, what do you mean? What's it about? I say, well, you took a photograph. What were you thinking? You know, what was it? Was it the color, the shape, the texture, the light? What was it that brought you to that image that made you want to press the shutter? And I think there are two follow-ups to this. One is sometimes it's worthwhile to look at that image quickly. Do it as soon as you get back to home or your hotel room or wherever.
Your gut reaction.
Your gut, you're still there. You're still mentally there. The sounds, the smells, everything is there, and that can help you to interpret it. But another way is leave it and come back in 2 months, 3 months, because you'll now have a fresh perspective. And you may look at it and go, what was I thinking? You know, forget it.
I'm a big believer in both. To do a quick edit to find the obvious things, knowing full well that I'll let time pass so that I can go back in and do a secondary or a tertiary edit to look for those things that I wasn't thinking about when I shot it.
But something took you there.
Yeah.
Something made you press the shutter.
Yeah.
Try and revisit that.
Sometimes it was by accident.
Well, those are the ones I delete, the ones of my shoes.
But the point is that one of the problems that a lot of photographers have is that they come back fresh from the field, they look at their images, and they're remembering what they saw, what they smelled, what they tasted, what they tried to do.
But it may not be in the shot.
Yeah, and so they have a reaction that is oftentimes negative. You know, a lot of photographers think that a really hard shot has some kind of intrinsic value.
In other words, one that where you almost fell off the cliff.
Yeah.
Where the guy almost punched you in the nose for photographing his girlfriend.
Yeah. But the point, in fact, is that in the long-term grand scheme of things, nobody really cares how hard it was to do a shot. So what really matters is to allow enough time to pass so that you can forget your successes and your failures, to then go back and review the work with kind of a fresh eye, you know, without the burden.
To address, sorry to interrupt, but to address the image on its own terms.
Yeah.
Just for what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What works, what doesn't work.
So what we've agreed is sometimes you want to dive right into the image. Sometimes you want to put it off until some point in the future. And like everything else, there are no absolute rules. But I think it's important for every photographer, not so much when you're out shooting, let your gut guide you. If something appeals, you want to press the shutter, that's great. But when you're sitting and reviewing your images, I think it's really important to ask yourself the question as you go through your raw files, both raw in the sense of raw and raw in the sense of unedited, and just look at the shot and say, well, what does that mean to me? And also remember, it's only you that matters. Don't think about what will an audience think. What will a potential purchaser or hanging on a wall in a gallery or in a restaurant, or what will my grandmother think? It's you.
Yeah. So I think that's a good segue in terms of moving into selection editing.
Yeah, exactly.
How you rank and pick what it is that you want to invest the time and effort on.
Okay, let's do that next.
Okay.